Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, the ultimate resource for everything you should need for your next sightseeing tour. At least I hope there's everything you'll need. We're up on the northeast coast of Australia today where we're going to attempt another lunch break flight over the beautiful city of Cairns, hometown of one of our members who was gracious enough to give me a personal tour last week. And as you can see, we're going to be flying the XCub, and yes, it has floats on it, so yeah. And I just noticed there's a little oar strapped on the inside of that. That might come in handy. Pretty cool. All right, so if you haven't seen one of our lunch break flights yet, those are designed, at least my intention, is to get the entire video in under 15 minutes. And in light of that, I'm not even going to show you the little NavMap satellite image at the end like we usually do, but I will go ahead and show you the Google map just so you can see where we are and where we're going. So here's Cairns up here, right up in the northeast over there. And it's not a big place, as you can see. I was really surprised when we flew out here how small it was. So here's where the airport is, this gray area here. We're just going to come up here, cruise out here a little bit to get our altitude, and then skirt along the side of these mountains over here, come along this side of downtown, come up this little creek right here, check out the wharfs and the port area, some of the touristy district, then fly over here, and we're going to land right down here on this reservoir, which is about 30 miles altogether. I know it probably doesn't look like much there, but hopefully we'll be able to squeeze the whole thing in under 15 minutes. All right, so parking brake off. And if you want to take this flight just as we are, as always, the link for little NavMap will be in the video description. Just get into little NavMap, download that link, open it up in there, and you'll be good to go. So this is Cairns International, which has a 10,000-foot runway. And obviously we're in a STOL plane, so we're not going to drive all the way to the end of the runway. We can just go right over here. And I've got no add-ons installed. There aren't really that many available for out here. There's some for this airport, but since we're only going to be seeing it for a second, and because the city is photogrammetry, I didn't want to have any performance issues, so we're just going to leave that out. Other than that, I don't think it needs too much. It just looks really good. All right, one notch of flaps. Rolling start. Here we go. Landing lights on. So we'll try to spot over to our right. They have a little VOR station over there, which we don't get to see too often in the sim, so we'll check that out. And you're going to see the coastline as soon as we come up. And not too far off the shore is where the Great Barrier Reef is. And there's a couple of in-sim POIs out there you can fly out to, probably 20 miles off the coast. We got some dive boats out there, which is kind of neat looking to fly out over the ocean, then all of a sudden you see those little islands and stuff out there. But it's a decent little hike in this plane. Alright, so gears up to the extent we have any gears. Flaps up. And we'll go ahead and get the autopilot on. And we're going to be cruising for most of this at 2,000 feet, but we'll probably wind up coming up to 2,500 to 3,000 to get over the mountains before the reservoir. Oh, look at that. They got a little weather radar antenna too. I didn't notice that before. Alright, so if we can see it, the VOR antenna, or transmitter I guess, is going to be right down here in this field over there. Let's see if we can spot it. And I have all the ships turned on, both regular shipping traffic and the leisure boats, so we might even spot a few sailboats out here. There it is right there. Not quite high enough to get a good look at it, but you can definitely see it if you're any higher. Looks like a VOR station. Fantastic. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull the throttle back a little bit, pull the RPMs back some, because we'll start overspeeding once we flatten out. So a few facts about Cairns. As of 2022, the city had a population of just under 160,000, so again, not real big, making it the 15th largest in the country by the number of residents. And it was founded in 1876 after they discovered some gold over in Hodgkinson River, which is about 50 miles to the east, just on the other side of those mountains there. And they named this place after Sir William Wellington Cairns, who was the recently deceased former governor of Queensland, recently deceased at the time. He died 2 years before they named this place. And Queensland is the state that we're in, up in the northeast. And pretty big too. Not as big as West Australia, but pretty big. During World War II, this was a major staging area for U.S. forces heading up north to slug it out with the Japanese in the Battle of the Coral Sea, using that airport back there for their base of operations for the aircraft, and then all the wharfs we're going to see down by downtown for all the Navy stuff. And then after the war, tourism became the primary economic driver, which is still the case today, particularly for divers heading out to the reef. Look at these mountains out here. I had no idea it was this hilly up here either. I mean, it is just gorgeous. Look how detailed all that stuff is down there. The fields look great. The buildings look great. I took a group flight with Freaky D out here a couple nights ago, and he was pointing out that I said, well, what do you see as someone who's a modder when you look down there? Because I thought it looked fantastic. And he's like, oh, those cranes could use some work. And yeah, that's what I want to hear. Perfect. Only with a modder's eye would you spot something like that. Okay, so this thing right down here, let me lean out the window. That's called the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum. And that's a private collection that they've opened to the public, and it is massive. I looked at their website, and they easily have hundreds of cannons and tanks and howitzers, armored everything. And it's the largest collection in the whole country. I wonder if they take them out and drive them around that little track. And this area here connects to some cable cars that go all the way, like gondolas, go all the way up to the top of this mountain, and then all the way down the other side of it. And it looks like it is just beautiful. There's a bunch of waterfalls on the other side of it. And it's about a 6-mile circuit if you go all the way around. But this is a big nature preserve over a rainforest that they say may be the oldest in the world. It's called the Daintree Rainforest, and some speculate that it may have been around for as many as 180 million years, which is old. About 100 million years older than the Rockies, as a matter of fact, so that's ancient. Alright, so as we cruise over to downtown, I'll tell you some fun facts about Cairns. The world's most dangerous bird, the cassowary, is native to this area, and you might have seen one of them in your local zoo. I think we've got 2 of them here in Jacksonville. And they look a lot like a dinosaur with feathers. They got a big bony crest on the top of their head. Their legs look very dinosaurish. But they said they're pretty vicious if you pester them, so if you see one in the wild out here, just leave it alone. You might also come across the Hercules moth, which is the largest in the world with a wingspan of over 10 inches. And I had to take a look at the caterpillars because the moth looked beautiful, but the caterpillars, not so much. They get up to 5 inches long, and they look horrifying. They're white, and they got spikes all over them. Very gross. And as if the birds and the moths aren't enough to give you nightmares, there's also plenty of saltwater crocs roaming around the wilds out here. And they got a big museum, or a zoo, I guess, dedicated to those guys, a couple more miles up the coast. This looks a lot like Papua New Guinea, doesn't it? I mean, if it wasn't for the houses down there. And that's actually the next landmass you'd hit if you kept going north here from Australia. And once you come over these mountains here, this is definitely like a rain shadow, so the weather probably comes in from this way, dumps all the rain out because it looks like the rest of Australia over there. Just desert. We'll get a little tiny peek of it as we come back up over these mountains to land. And my host for that flight, the tour, said that this thing here is called Pyramid Mountain. And I don't know if that's the official name or not, because I couldn't find anything called Pyramid Mountain, but you can see why they call it that. And I think the tallest mountain in Australia may be down that way, about 100 miles. Alright, I'm just trying not to overspeed. Just keep that dialed in. Okay, so we got a couple things to look at as we're coming in here. This thing right down here, which we'll get a much better look at when we come around, is the big stadium here in town. They got a bunch of fields, as you can see. But that one's called Cassowary Stadium, if I'm saying that correctly, which hosts cricket, rugby, and Australian rules football, also known as footy by the Aussies. And I asked my tour guide if that's the same thing as rugby. He said it wasn't, but the explanation was so confusing I just gave up on it. But I looked at the internet to try to get a description of it, and they said it is described as a hybrid of rugby and soccer with a bit of basketball, hockey, football, lacrosse, and volleyball, all thrown in for good measure. That's it right down there. And I think they said on their website that you have to be a member of it. I think there's a social club down there. Very ritzy affair. Look at that scenery. Not a big place, is it? Not very big at all. And they got shopping malls everywhere. Everything you see that looks like this is probably a shopping mall. But I bet they get a lot of tourism out here. This thing here I thought for sure was a horse track. My tour guide said that he didn't think they were still using it today. When I got on the website, it looks like they have some... That's another shopping mall. It looks like they have some kind of big annual festival out there with maybe some amateur horse racing. But it appears that today they may use it to train racehorses out there, which is pretty cool. Every town's got to have their horse track. Looks like someone's been trouncing around out there a little bit. They need to lay some sod. Look at these power lines down here. There's not a big power plant that I could see out here, but those look really nice down there. And we're going to see something here in just a second that really caught my eye. The first thing I saw was this, and then I just thought, well, that's some interesting looking dirt shapes. Let me get to the side so you can see it. And you see that thing right there, just above the window? That's an old drive-in movie theater called the Old Worry Drive-In. And they originally opened that in 1961 and then closed it in 2000. And then they reopened it again in 2010, but it only lasted for a year. I guess people have kind of moved past the drive-in phase of life. And the plan now is to redevelop it into some residential stuff, but they appear to still keep that one screen up there, which looks neat. Alright, so we're circling back around here. We'll take a look at the little waterway here, and this is, just take a look at how long this is. I would have thought with a big city popped on the end of a river, I thought this was much, much longer. It's not even called a river, it's called a creek. And it's called Chinaman Creek. You can only get away with that in Australia. If that was the US, they would have changed the name years ago and then burned the whole city down to punish it for calling it Chinaman. This thing here is an old landfill, which looks a lot like a landfill once we get over it. Look at all these power lines here. That is just beautiful. Got some rusty old containers down there. This is the Cairns golf course. I don't know if that's public or private, but it seems to be the only one out in this vicinity. And this thing here is a recycling facility, which also looks very nice. I knew that was going to be a landfill right when we came over it, and it turns out that's just what it is. And it doesn't appear they're still using it. Looks like they're trying to green it up and reclaim it. I don't know where the current landfill is. You know, something we haven't really flown over is an active use landfill anywhere. I'll have to see if I can find one somewhere, see what those look like in the sim. Alright, so as we come on down here, you'll see, and this is what Freaky D had noticed, that the ships look okay, the harbors and ports and all that look okay. They probably could have done a little bit better job with that. The cranes don't look great, particularly when you get closer. But from a distance, they're not too bad. And this is called Admiral's Island, and I'm not sure why it's called that. I bet there's some military history with that, but I didn't think to look. My apologies for that. That's a real oversight on my part. This thing right down here is their cruise terminal, and you'll see they got some numbers on the top of that if we're close enough to see it. And unfortunately, there's no cruise ships parked down there. So if you head pretty much straight out that way, about 15 miles, that's where you'll come across the Great Barrier Reef POI. Which again is kind of neat if you feel like flying all the way out there. Alright, let's pick up the pace just a little bit, because we got some bandwidth there. Got some more stadiums. None of them quite as big as that first one that we saw, though, at least as far as the spectator areas go. So down here along the point, they got a lot of shopping areas. I think this is the big touristy district right here. And this thing that looks kind of like the back of a pill bug is their convention center. They opened that thing in 1996, and they also call it the Snake Pit. It's been home to the local national basketball team, the Cairns Taipans, since 1999. And it won some awards for convention centers back in the early 2000s. I don't know what kind of classifications are in awards, but it looked like a regular old convention center inside to me. So they got some casinos down here. This thing is another little shopping complex. They got a bunch of malls in there. And this appears to be a public freshwater lagoon of some kind. I don't think that belongs to any of the resorts down there. And sometimes since they built the map for this, they put one of those giant Ferris wheels over here. And I don't know who the heck is convincing people to invest money in those things because... Oh, there's a speedboat cruise. Now look at that. That's awesome. Someone's driving their little fishing boat back in. That one down in Melbourne, we saw that one. It's been shut down forever. The one in Orlando, never anybody there when I've gone down there. I wonder how that one in London's doing. They get a lot of tourists down there. That one's probably doing okay. But that's kind of neat, isn't it? Really jumps out at you. So this thing here is called The Pier. That's a big shopping center. I think that's the casino, and a bunch of these are hotels right along here. But just not enough room for any of the huge resorts that you'd see in cities like this on the coast. Alright, we're going to cross over the top of these mountains, and I need to get up to about 3,000 feet, so let's go ahead and start that climb. And since we've already got some altitude, we'll climb at 300 feet a minute. We don't need to be right at 3,000. So once we get to the mountains, we're going to be flying right above something called Freshwater Creek, which has some beautiful waterfalls we unfortunately won't be able to see in the sim. And then to our right, we'll see a fabulous little residential area tucked down in the valley, and there's going to be a big reservoir to our left called Lake Morris, and that's where we're going to be landing. And they dammed that thing up to provide some additional fresh drinking water for the city. And we'll get a very quick peek at the Copperlode Falls Dam as we're circling around to land on Lake Morris. You know I'm going to take a look for any... That's the first reason I went out there was to see the dam, which is kind of neat looking. It's not real big, but there's two parts to it. Hopefully we'll get to see both of them. One on one side of it looks like an earthworks dam, and on the other side of it they got a big spillway, and I read that they built it on the top of the Copperlode Falls, which is why it's called that. And it looks like the falls were probably beautiful before they destroyed them with a dam, but the dam's pretty neat looking too. And it's a default dam too. It hadn't been touched up, and it still looks pretty neat. So we'll land right behind that thing once we come around it. Yeah, this looks very much like PNG out here. Just remove the houses and the little flat areas by the shore. But what a gorgeous scene, isn't it? Just beautiful. Well, they got a little mine of some kind down there. Alright, for some reason our Charleston flight, the one that we just uploaded, the last one I put up there, has not been loved by YouTube. We have not gotten a lot of views for that one, which is just too bad because I really thought that was a great flight. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check it out. But I'll mention something I mentioned on there just in case you don't get a chance to watch that one. I have figured out, I think it's working, a way to get you guys our bookmark file for little NavMap. I've had many people ask me, since we've had the channel up and running, about getting the bookmark file, because you can load the flight plan up, but if you don't have the bookmarks in there, which I've labeled all of them, by the way, so you'll know what, it's not just a bookmark, you can see what it's marking. It's kind of hard to spot the landmarks if you're just following the route. It's a lot easier to have a little NavMap pulled up so you can see what exactly you're looking for and where it is. So I'm going to start including that link as well for all of our videos. It'll be the most recent full set of bookmarks for all of the flights that we've ever taken. So the whole globe will be covered with those. So if you want to go back and take any of their previous flights, all you'll need to do is upload the most recent one, and they should all be in there now, which is pretty cool. And that's going to be in the Discord server, by the way, which is what all that was getting to. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, be sure to check that out. We have a lot of fun. All my test flights, I always just get in the group chat and leave it on if anyone wants to fly along. And pretty much for all of them so far, someone has decided to fly along, sometimes multiple people, which is a whole lot of fun. Alright, so look at this down here. They got a big mine down there. Looks fantastic. Imagine living down there. Just beautiful. And they got all these waterfalls, which unfortunately did not render very well in the sim. Running all through there. Very neat. Okay, so once we get over this little lip right here, I'm going to flatten out, slow down, start coming down, because what we're going to try to do is come around this side of this thing, and there's a nice long stretch that I think we'll be able to land in just fine over there. And we do have at least 3 flight plans submitted for our quarterly group flight, our flight recommendation competition. And I'm going to change the rules for that just a little bit, I think. Initially I said, you know, if you load up the full flight plan, it will qualify, but even if someone does load up a full flight plan, alright, autopilot off. I'm going to change it a little bit because I'm going to draw it around all the stuff that I think is the best to look at. So we're never going to fly, rarely I wouldn't think, fly an actual full flight plan that someone's uploaded. There's that dam down there, see it? So there's where the spillway was, and if we're even closer you can see the rocks where the falls originally were, and then on this side of it is where the earthworks dam is. So just the region. So give me ideally an airport to take off from, one to land at, and some sights to see along the way. But the competition will be voting on whatever flight I post for that region, and you know I'm going to do my very, very best so no one has to worry about me destroying their flight plan that they uploaded. And then once a quarter we'll vote on the best recommended area, and whoever wins will get a gift card to your favorite sim vendor. Look at these power lines up here. Only in Australia would they decide to go over the mountains instead of around them. That's how they do it out here. Alright, so let's slow way down. I'm just going to cut the throttle because we gotta lose some speed. Some of the trees got that kind of jagged appearance. I didn't notice any, but if you really look for them, you can spot them. They're out here. There's a lot of them. All right, look over there in the distance. You can just start to see how it's turning to the brownish stuff. If we're a little bit higher, you would definitely see it because it's all desert on the other side of these trees. All right, so one notch of flaps out. I need to remember to get my water rudders out once we come down, or I won't be able to steer this thing. All right, another notch of flaps. And that handle's kind of getting in the way, isn't it? So we're just going to come around the side of this thing right here. Let's give it a little bit of throttle. And she's going to start barking at me here in a minute to let me know my gears aren't down, and I can suppress that once she starts doing that. Once we get down real close to the water, you'll see the shoreline doesn't look great, but this is just a neat little area to come in at. Really cool. Okay, so it looks like we got a little stand of trees there. We need to come over the top of that, obviously. And I think the dam is on the other side of that little thing sticking out to the left there. So we'll land in that straight area over those trees. And then I'll just get turned around so we can look at the dam. And we'll wrap it up. Man, I don't know if we made 15 minutes or not. That's about as close as I could get to still see everything I wanted to see out here. Alright, one more notch of flaps, full flaps. How cool is this? Neat little area. Yeah, there's some of those funky trees over there. Really kind of hard to pick them out from the air. If you're real close to them, you can see them. Yeah, see the shoreline down there? Maybe the water level's just a little bit low.
Here's up for water landing.
Alright, gotcha, sister, thank you.
Here's up for water landing.
This is a cool spot, really cool. Alright, let's give ourselves a little room to turn around. Alright, flaps up, and water rudder out. Gonna come out. Come up. There we go. All right, let's take a hard left here. Yeah, do a little peel out. And there's the dam. Boy, that was perfect. Look at that. So this is the earthwork side, and this thing right here, which is kind of filled in underneath, looks like a little jetty of some kind, and initially I thought it might have been a hydro dam, but I don't think it is, because it looks like one of those little intake areas that you see on some of them. All right, let's get this shut off. And why not do an external shot? Let's see how it looks. Oh, that worked out well, too. Camera was in the right spot. All right, so that's it, guys. That's Cairns. Up next, we probably have one more lunch break flight, I think, if we don't do the Budapest flight first. So those are in the can. Also, no pun intended, also down by Tasmania, which is where my guide actually lives now, also in a beautiful area. I'm going to go check that out. And then we do have those other 2 flight plan recommendations. So we got a lot in the hopper. Be sure to check out that Discord server. If you want the bookmarks, they will be included in the video description along with this exact flight plan. Had an absolute blast as always, guys. Can't wait to see y'all again in the skies. Later.